And welcome. Welcome everybody to this Spring Marketing Insights seminar on behalf of UL Careers. My name is Brendan Lally and I'll be hosting our session, this lunchtime session. I'm joined today by we'll start on my list here. We have Gillian Maxwell, Senior Marketing Specialist at Veritas Technologies. You're very welcome, Gillian.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We have Johnny Queally, Global Account Executive at Google. You're very welcome, Johnny.
Cheers.
Thanks a million for joining us. And last but not least, Cliodhna Barrett, Frank and Honest Marketing Graduate at the Musgrave Group. Cliodhna, you're very welcome. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Brendan.
And just to mention all of ye, if you know, we won't talk about the counties, but you're all graduates of the University of Limerick. So you think you get away, but you can never actually leave. We have you for life, and that's basically the deal, you know. But seriously, thank you very much for giving your spare time to, I suppose, help those that are looking to enter the market in the world of marketing, and maybe just to tell your stories. And we obviously have a few questions here to guide the conversation as well. So I'll jump right in. And so as I said there, we might ask you firstly to just tell your marketing career journey. And Gillian, I have you here first on my list. If you want to take a couple of minutes and just tell us, you know, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, of course. It's one of those. It's a great time when we do have days like this where we get to do a bit of a look back, because I think with anything it moves at the pace of time just doesn't seem to keep up. And obviously if you look at your career, it changes kind of drastically. So yeah, I obviously went to UL, business and marketing, and I think the first step in terms of that, obviously, and the benefit from that versus other colleges at the time, I don't know how it's changed since, where it's obviously the work experience, which gets you immediately onto the, you know, employment ladder, and you get that experience built up. And that was in GCAS in Shannon, in the engine leasing department. And I think I went into thinking it was marketing, which you know, that's where obviously I was studying, but marketing in aviation is quite considerably different than what it is in our sphere, is what we would consider it. So started there, really good in terms of sales, you know, selling of aircraft, and seeing what the millions and in terms of a corporation company is, you know, dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And then moving there from finishing UL, obviously looking to see what would be next. And, you know, Dublin obviously took my sights, and I did need something else. I needed something else to kind of stick and kind of project me for that. So I ended up doing a digital marketing course in Dublin. It was actually part of a graduate who used to be in the course as well, that he put me up for that, which was great. It gives added, you know, complexity and kind of muscle to your CV. So I was able to do that, and then that projected me into GSK, which is a pharmaceutical brand. Again, you know, very different from aviation, but it allowed to see how they would brand and promote you know, respiratory products and different types of diagnosis as well, as to how we do that. And obviously pharmaceutical is very regulated and complex compared to the usual corporate worlds that we would have seen ourselves expecting ourselves to be in as well at that time. And from there, I then I was able to get an interview at Microsoft, and I spent quite a considerable amount of time there, 5 years. And, you know, it was one of those where there was various roles within it, and then obviously getting to see different aspects of the company, and certainly would, you know, took a lot of insights and knowledge and experience from there. But I did want to, you know, switch it up a little bit. So obviously looking at the market at the time, which was a year and a half ago, and Veritas Technologies, I did want to stay in the tech space. So that was one of the opportunities that came up. And in the year and a half that I've been there, I think my role has changed or evolved, even so for what it was, about 3 different role aspects that I've taken that time. And that has led me to where I'm working in the corporate marketing team now from a global level. So looking after all the regions that Veritas looks after for our data protection, and the promotion and the campaigns that we do across the company.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Gillian. So a wealth of experience, and we'll be interested in your input as we go through today's session. Next on my list here is Cliodhna. So Cliodhna, I might just ask you to maybe just tell us your journey to where you are today.
Yeah. I suppose my career journey has only really started. I'm only starting out. And it's only when you look back on the year and 8 months that I've done, you realize how far you've come. And it's only when you reflect that you're like, God, so much has happened, and you take note of it. But yeah, the same as Gillian, I started out in UL in 2016 as a general business student. I then obviously went into marketing, and I did entrepreneurship alongside of that as well. So they went hand in hand quite nicely together. We obviously had the great opportunity for placement, and placement is obviously a strong part of the business degree in UL. And so I really wanted to make the most of that. And I was delighted when Intel asked me for an interview and offered me a job. So I headed out to Shannon in Intel and Shannon. Again, similar to Gillian, I went in thinking, this will be a marketing focused position, but it was more so communications and internal communications. Intel is obviously a lot of software engineers, so I kind of had to get up to speed with what software engineers do in order to communicate internally. So a lot of that was hosting internal sustainability weeks, for example, for the engineers, and a lot of it was attracting talent to the company via Twitter. So I got great experience from there, and I really brought that through with me when I finished my placement and went into my final year in UL. We were given opportunity then to work with local businesses, which I thought was second to none experience, because you've started your career journey off in college, and then you continue it into your final year. So we really had a head start against people who mightn't have had that experience. So we were working with local businesses to come up with business plans to market their new products in local communities. So that really stood to me when I finished college, or not even finished, but I started applying for jobs. I knew I didn't want to do a master's straight out of college. So I had started applying for jobs in my second semester. And I was offered 2 jobs, one of them being Musgrave. And I accepted Musgrave because I liked their ethos and their values, and I thought they aligned quite nicely with mine. So I took that. So I did my final semester in college. I knew that in September I would have the job in Musgrave, and that was supposed to be in Cork. But obviously the pandemic hit, so we finished college at the beginning of a world pandemic, which was crazy. And I began my first job as a professional in the middle of a pandemic, so from my desk at home. So it was really an interesting time. And from there, I joined the Frank and Honest marketing team, which I was delighted about, because Frank and Honest is essentially a really new brand. It's only 5 years old, and it's Ireland's #1 on the Coffee Go brand. So it's grew enormously over the past few years. So it was a really fresh and a really young, youthful brand that I was joining, and I was really excited about it. And my first day, my manager said, "You're looking after local marketing." So immediately I was given head of local marketing for Frank and Honest, which was really, I felt like, God, I'm in over my head here. I haven't a clue what I'm doing. But those are the trials and tribulations when you start your career. Imposter syndrome sets in, and you need to keep looking back and keep realizing how far you've come, and build that self-confidence. So yeah, I've been on the team for 1 year and 8 months now. The graduate program finishes up in September, so I have another 6 months on the team, and hopefully then I'll stay within Musgrave. They've dozens and dozens of other marketing positions, so I'm hoping that I'll stick with the company and keep building out on my experience from there.
Excellent, Cliodhna. Thanks very much. And it's great to get such an honest, I suppose, story of your journey into your present position. And it's good, both you and Gillian, to hear you mention your co-op job placement was the kind of kickstart to your career and the bedrock for or foundation for the careers that you're currently building. So thanks both of you for that. And last but not least, we have Johnny there in Google. Johnny, I'll hand it over to you just to tell us, I suppose, your own career journey.
Yeah, a lot less smooth than the two girls, definitely. So I did my undergrad in LIT, and I think I'm a lot older than the two of you as well, because I finished up in 2009, which was the height of the recession in Ireland. So job opportunity wise, they're fairly limited. So I decided to do, I wanted to do a master's anyway, but that was kind of an extra reason to do it. So I did the Marketing, Consumption and Society Masters in UL in 2009, 2010. From that, after graduating, I worked in Penny's in the Crescent as a weekend manager, and basically struggled big time to get an interview for any kind of marketing position at all. Now, it didn't help that I had this blanket kind of idea that, oh, I'm going to be a marketing manager, not really knowing what that was, or not understanding half of the job titles that were available. So, you know, there was a little bit of an education piece I needed to do myself. But after I think it was 9 months I spent in Penny's, which was a really good place to work actually, I left to go to Abu Dhabi, and I was teaching for 2 years. So I was quite interested in the educational side of things as well. So I basically I was doing tutoring in LIT while I was doing my master's, and I was working for LIT, the college, and I was tutoring business studies students. So I was interested in the education side of things. And when the opportunity came up to teach abroad, I did the interviews for Abu Dhabi, and they basically said, look, we'll make you a business studies teacher. We'll make you head of department after a year. There's a career path here. And I was thinking, can't get a marketing job. Maybe I can go in from the educational angle. But when I arrived out there, they basically handed me my books and made me a primary school grade 3, 4, and 5 English teacher, and took my passport off me for 6 weeks. So I tried to leave the first night. I couldn't leave. But I ended up loving it. Like, I ended up like teaching in the summer school for kids with learning difficulties. I stayed for 2 years instead of 1. Amazing experience. And then when I came home, I kind of had to come to a crossroads of like, okay, master's finished now a couple of years ago. I haven't done anything related to the course I studied in. I either have to get qualified here as a teacher, or else I go back and try and find a marketing position. So I said, look, I want to find a marketing position. Went back home and was unemployed for about, I'd say, 6 months. Just, I couldn't get even an interview. Like, the amount of CVs I sent off was ridiculous, and to everywhere, different countries, everything. I was willing to travel, could not get my foot in the door at all. I was working in UL actually, at the summer school. They have like English and French and Spanish kids, so I was teaching them English. So I was doing that to keep me sane, basically. But there was a kind of program at the time the Irish government had, and it was called Job Bridge. So basically, it would let companies open roles where they were unpaid, and you basically get like government would pay you to basically do these positions. And I managed to get a position with a company called Hailstar Commerce, and they were a website startup company basically for Irish businesses. So I went in and did that for, I think, 9 months. And having the experience of a startup was amazing, because I went in a marketing position, but I set up events. I was doing sales pitches. I was actually doing a little bit of web design as well on the side that I picked up from the lads. And it was really like you're thrown in multiple different directions, very, very scrappy. But at the same time, I was still like, I'm not getting paid here. So quite demoralizing. And I was, again, I had a system where I sent off a minimum of 3 CVs or applied for 3 jobs every day until I got something. So like, I have an inbox of hundreds of rejection emails just from the people who got back to me. Eventually I was hounding recruiters, and I was like, look, what's going on? Why haven't I getting interviews? What's the story? And I think that was a big turning point, because I got into a couple of recruiters, bluntly honest, experience isn't great, CV needs to be worked on. Worked up the CV, that was fine. And you know, I got in with a recruiter in Sigmar, and I was telling her about my work experience. she wasn't too knowledgeable in the digital side of things, and she was in charge of the digital accounts. So she ended up saying, would you be interested in working for Facebook? And I ended up getting an interview for Facebook. One of the guys in the masters was working there already, so I met up with him, taught me through the role. I ended up getting the job, worked for Facebook for a year, and I went from a scrappy kind of startup situation to a multinational company where you're getting free food. They have an ice cream machine in the office. There's like, you know, you're working with massive accounts, and it was completely going from one side to the exact opposite. I was in Facebook for a year. From there, then a year later, I got into Google. I've been in Google about 7 years now. Started off working on the UK team as an account manager for agencies. I'm up in the global team now and looking to move into the kind of team.
I think
You're knocked your mic off there,
Yeah.
Johnny.
At what point did I lose you? Because I've been talking for a long time. But basically, yeah, in Google for 7 years. GlaxoSmithKline is actually one of our clients, Gillian. They're really good to work with. And we work with basically the clients who are globally recognized and the top kind of spenders within Google. So kind of a lot of tech projects would be fairly cutting edge. You're dealing with a lot of like C-level stakeholders, and it's a really good experience. But if I take what I've done career-wise compared to what I thought I was going to do coming out of college, they're two completely different things. I'm sure the girls will agree that, like, you know, there's so many different channels or routes you can go down within marketing. Like when I was in college, Facebook wasn't even invented. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things that there's lots of different avenues you can go down with marketing. And yeah, I'm kind of on the digital side now, so I think I'm happy sticking on that side of things.
Excellent. Well, Johnny, thanks very much. I mean, that's a roller coaster and an honest account of a different marketplace that you entered after UL. And from a careers point of view, your networking and your grit are admirable and really got you where you needed to go. I'm sure there's many days you felt like giving up, and it just shows it's proof that, you know, you keep going and eventually you'll get a break, you know. So that's a fantastic account, Johnny. Really appreciate the honesty. So just moving on, I might just go back maybe to you, Gillian, and ask you, you know, what is a typical workday like for you?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was only thinking what this would have been like even a few months ago. So it does change quite a bit. But what I mentioned earlier on in terms of my role, even the last year, it's moved or evolved from regions. So initially it was international, which is, you know, your Europe region for the most part, and then as well the Asia Pacific. So kind of moved from there, and now I've kind of moved into the global role. So obviously global means, you know, you're dealing with a lot of different time zones. So what it tends to be is a flexible day. So you start off, you know, maybe on a Monday I might have my Asia Pacific calls from 8 onwards, and then it tends to kind of move westwards towards kind of Europe, and then around the midday then I might have calls with Dublin. A lot of our EMEA base are based here, and then, you know, France and the emerging markets as well. And then from about 1 p.m. onwards, Boston is the start, like the first of our America's office that come online, and moves the way through to 5 p.m. when Santa Clara, which is our head office on the West Coast, takes off. So it depends. I could finish up at maybe 8, but it depends, you know, throughout the day I will be you know, moving around to make sure that I'm not burning the candles at both ends. And the company obviously realised that if you have a global role, that flexibility is needed to be there. But they are kind of check-in calls or you know, marketing team you know, check-ins as well, or at least obviously you might have sales engagements as well, or and it's across business functions as well. So the product solution team, I'll be meeting with regional field marketing leads. Sometimes, you know, you'll have procurement and supply chain, also operations, and then even today as well, like leadership from a global aspect, we have a call at 4. So it's quite varied. a lot of different business functions, a lot of different cultural backgrounds as well, that you need to be aware of. So a Dublin base works for this for the time being. So yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, a real window there, Gillian, into a global account and what that means with the various time zones. So thanks very much for illustrating that beautifully. And I suppose it's a nice then balance, Cliodhna, if you could give us, you know, a typical day from a domestic account. Obviously, you were given, as you said, the Frank and Honest, which is developing very, very quickly. Actually, I think I saw it on television recently. So maybe you could just tell, I don't know if you're involved in that, but just tell us what a typical day looks like for you.
Yeah, like a typical day. I mean, no day is like the other, especially with things opening up again. And as I mentioned, I specifically am leading out on local marketing. So what that entails is helping our local retail partners. So that would be your super values and your centres across Ireland, how they can, you know, input marketing plans that would increase coffee sales into their specific stores or the local areas around those stores. So that could entail me traveling from Mayo to Cork to meet a retailer. I could be going to Dublin, or I could be going to Achill Mayo. It all depends on the needs of the retailers. So that's where I would be supporting them. And then another day, we work with a lot of external suppliers for a lot of our marketing activities. So whether it's PR or whether it will be social media or even the traditional media. And as you mentioned, we've recently developed the new Frank and Honest television advert. So that involved a lot of heading up to Dublin to television studios, which is really cool. And you get to see that firsthand. So that could be Wednesday. And then in between all that, you know, you have your more mundane activities like, you know, budgeting and raising POs and whatnot. And although it's not as exciting, you know, it's just as important. So yeah, we do a lot of meetings. Our calendars can get filled up quite quickly. But yeah, it's just a case of managing time. We work 9 to 5. So and you know, once 5 comes, you know, they expect you to turn off. So they're quite lenient in that sense. So yeah, it's always changing, and I think with things opening up now again, it will get busier in terms of being on the road. So yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to see what will come.
Excellent, excellent. And it's a nice variety, and it seems that you know, whilst you are remote, you do get to get out on site and various sites across Ireland, which gives, I suppose, a bit of diversity to the role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely breaks up the week. You know, sitting at a desk 9 to 5 Monday to Friday can get to you. So I think it's essential to, you know, meet face to face, and social interaction is really important as well. So it's great now with everything opening up again.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Cliodhna. And then finally, Johnny, a typical day for you there at Google?
Yeah, it kind of varies as well. The way we work, our team has a portfolio of 23 clients who are global spenders and quite technically advanced. So what Google does is we sponsor them to have these tech projects throughout the year, and we give a lot of funding towards that. So at the start of the year, we have a portfolio of different things that we want them to do, be it around privacy or cookie deprecation coming up soon. They have to have future-proof use cases around first-party data, whatever it is, any cloud-based projects. So our typical day-to-day will be project managing a number of these projects across this portfolio of clients. Similar to what Gillian said, like if we're dealing with Singapore in the morning, like they're super early in the morning, or if we have LA that come online, you know, about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the day. It really depends and varies client by client and what kind of projects you're put into. There is internal stuff you do as well, and there's also stretch opportunities. There's also the admin side, as was mentioned by Cliodhna. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, you're basically project managing and touching base on multiple different clients in multiple different regions, just to ensure that things are going smoothly and you know, the work is being done. But yeah, it varies massively within Google, Brendan, because there's so many different roles and different teams and different areas. Like it's
very, very large organization. Yeah,
blows the mind sometimes. Yeah.
And what's like, are you hybrid, Johnny? You mentioned like, what's the work pattern like? Work-life balance, all that at Google? Work-life
balance is massive. So they have a massive kind of initiative around work-life balance. They don't want people to get burnt out, which can happen because there's a gym, for example, and a swimming pool in this building. And the fear with management is that people won't leave until, like, you know, you won't step out of you come in the morning time and you won't leave till like 9 o'clock at night, which isn't healthy. So there's also quite a lot of like socializing and stuff. There's also travel involved as well, with clients, but the work-life balance is super important. At the moment, the office is back open, but it's not mandatory to go in. What they're pushing towards is going to be a mandatory 3-day week of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you can work from home or come in on the other days, but that's not coming in until June. But in terms of like even working from home, like Google have given us, like on Friday, we have a global day off. They've given us additional like mental health days to make sure people aren't getting burnt out or working too much at home. They gave funding towards like setting up a home office, so they give you like a spot bonus of like, you know, everyone gets this set amount to spend on office furniture to bring for the house or whatever. And then at Christmas time, everyone got like an additional bonus just to be like for well-being or whatever. And you're instructed to spend this on things you enjoy. So there's quite an emphasis on, okay, you know, the work-life balance part is super important, and it comes from management down. So in one-to-ones with management, it's something that, like, if you're spending crazy time in the office, it's not a good thing. If you're coming in and working on Saturdays, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be able to do your job anyway within the time space, but like that's not a good sign. You're doing too much, or you're taking on too much if that's the case. So it's really good in terms of keeping work-life balance in place.
Yeah, and it's a real culture shift. I think the pandemic has really turned everything upside down, and I think companies are looking at things very, very differently. It's a revolution, really, in the way we work. So thanks, Johnny. Thanks a million for that. I'd like to move over to the recruitment process, or, you know, being what tips we would give, particularly a marketing graduate, for maybe an interview process. And I might ask you, Cliodhna, you know, maybe firstly, you're on a graduate program you mentioned with the Musgrave Group. Maybe just talk through what that's like, and then maybe a little bit, what was the interview process like for you?
Yeah. So as I said, I joined the company as a graduate, and I'm still in the program now, and it's a really great way to start your career, because obviously you're supported from day one. They recognize that, you know, you're fresh out of studying, you're new to the working world, the professional working world, essentially. So you have great support there, and particularly in Musgrave, they really want to see you develop into a really well-rounded young working professional. And the graduate program has a great aspect to it, whereby we undertake 6 modules throughout the 2 years that are helping us build our leadership skills. So they see their graduates as future leaders. So they see you excel within the company and go up the scales in the company and become managers, essentially. And that's what these modules help you with. It's the Irish Institute of Management in Dublin. So they come on and they give us a module nearly every quarter of different topics. It could be project management, and it could be marketing, and it could be accountancy. There's a wide range of different modules that they do. So it's great, and, you know, you're supported from day one. And you have also the support of the other graduates. So you people that are in the same position as you, even though they might be in different roles, we've all started out under the same circumstances, and you always have their friendship and their support there. So it's a nice community to have, especially when you're starting out in your career, and it can seem all so daunting. You just have people that can back you up and say, I feel that too. So it's nice to have that support system. And then I suppose the interviewing process of Musgrave is quite similar to what other graduate programs would be. So obviously you apply, and a lot of the time there's no just sending away your CV anymore. It's a full application form, and it can take a long time, and there's a lot of questions, and you want to put your best foot forward. So I often, like, my brother is actually in the process now of trying to find a job as a marketing student, and I said to him, you know, don't waste your time applying to hundreds of different companies, because you could spend days and weeks doing that. And if you get to the next round, you have to do assessment tests. If you get to the next round, you have to do video tests, and, you know, there's a lot to it. So you really need to be smart in, like, what you apply for and where you apply to. You know, if you have a good idea of where you see yourself and where you see yourself working, apply to those certain few and do a really good application form, instead of you know, applying to loads, doing a half written application form, and you'll probably get on better with the 5 that you did and you put your whole heart into. So that would be the one piece of advice that I give to people looking for jobs at the minute. And then from the application process, you often get to an assessment centre. So that's a group assessment. So there could be 8, there could be 30 other students with you. And you're just given different tasks throughout a day. It's a full day, and there could be 20 assessors watching you. So it is quite daunting, and you don't know what they're looking for, and you never will know what they're looking for. But one of the things, when I got offered the job in Musgrave, they said they liked how I was able to work both individually and as a group. So they don't like to see other people completely taken over. They like to see you, you know, make sure that everyone has their voice heard, but also getting your point across. So I often say that to my brother Phelim, just don't take over, but make sure that you're being heard as well. So yeah, that was kind of it. And I think just being able to work as a team is huge, especially in marketing, and it's such an agile environment. Being able to work in a team and anticipate change is a big one. So I think they're the main areas to be focusing on if you get to the group assessment stage.
Fantastic. And your brother's very lucky, Cliodhna, to have you go ahead and smooth out the path and come back with all the tips for him. And, you know, hats off to the Musgrave Group in relation to the development of the graduates with the Irish Management Institute. That sounds very, very interesting.
Yeah. And to be fair, like Musgrave, they really see potential, and you know, they see their graduates as future leaders of the business, so they put the time and they put the effort into you. So you really benefit the results of that. And you know, you're progressing every single day as a young working professional. So your career and your experience and your skill set are always getting better and better, especially within the graduate programs.
Okay. Perfect, and thanks very much for that, Cliodhna. Johnny and Gillian, just a question for graduates going to market. Aside from their academic, either undergrad degree or postgraduate degree, what else, or would there be any other tips for maybe extra skills? I'm thinking maybe additional courses or shorter online courses that would help at recruitment stage. Maybe I'll go to you, Johnny, first, and then Gillian, maybe if you have any thoughts.
I think there's so many options available for free courses that you can do. You can get accredited, like there's so many Google accreditations you can do online and just have them in the back pocket. That adds
plug in Google there, Johnny. Plug in Google.
Plug in Google. I'm sure there's competitors have stuff as well, but no, Google. But yeah, no, there's so many options that you can do to just bulk up your CV. And I think as well, like, you know, any kind of, and I know myself, I was working since I was 16, so I was always working when I was in college in retail or whatever. And I think being able to kind of communicate across in a CV your experience or your relevant experience that you might not think is relevant, and also if there were opportunities within the undergrad or masters or whatever students are involved in, where you did work with companies or did projects on companies, to be able to spotlight, you know, what kind of transferable skills that they've gained that might not be very obvious compared to, you know, if they had actually gained the experience firsthand. I think it's important to be able to sell yourself in that way. And that's what marketing is about, isn't it? It's all about being able to sell yourself. So about being able to get across those points. But in this day and age, there's so many resources available. If you really want to, you can upskill yourself in a very short period of time and for free. Even if it's choosing to highlight the fact that you've attended webinars, got accreditations that were free courses due online. There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, so go out and look for those, and anything extra can help. Thanks, Johnny. Anything, Gillian, to add to that?
Yeah, look, there's so much now, and I remember, you know, when I was certainly leaving, it was that, you know, how do you stand out? And if there's obviously, you know, a wealth of talent out there in the labour force, that it is difficult. But one thing that I found obviously was taking on that additional course. You know, it is something, again, add muscle to your CV. You're trying to make it as fruitful to a recruiter who's getting obviously inundated with it. And I would say, you know, any experience that you can have, because obviously worked in hotel groups when you start, and all of that still plays out to what I'm doing today, you know, in customer service and what you're thinking of the customer. So all of that is really, really fruitful to what you're looking, you know, as an employer to say, you know, you're out, you're getting that experience. Yes, it is transferable. And I would say use any of those opportunities, and don't as well, you know, there's people you come across, and I've come across in experiences today who've led me to where, you know, different opportunities come on board. So even if it's, you know, the hotel group that I had, or aviation, or people you might just come across within a company and you're networking, or you're kind of going out and meeting them, there's those little pockets of, you know, chances that come about and that you're working, you know, working towards, and they might be the ones that get you to your next. That's most of the jobs that I've tended to get is through connections, or, you know, any you know, just like networking events. They're really good as well. I was at one yesterday, and you know, there was a few opportunities that even came out of that. So just, I would say, look at what's around you and what you can kind of pickpocket as potential channels and opportunities for you to kind of hone in on. And like that, don't, you know, spread the net too wide. Try and use your energy and use it as best place you can, and try and get that little standout moment, I would think. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And a good point made there, Gillian, in relation to networking. I suppose we would roll in and support that from a careers point of view. It's a hugely valuable activity, probably the most valuable, rather than waiting for positions to just appear on websites, which is reactive. You'd have to be more proactive, should I say, in the market, and use your network and follow up and chase down. And even the alumni, the network from UL, any network, you know, is valuable in your pursuit. And then maybe just a step further, say you've been fortunate enough to get your graduate position. Would you have any thoughts on first impressions, or they say the first 100 days, you know, your own individual brand is kind of set in a company, you know, from your point of view, you know, what would you say? I might start with you, Cliodhna. Maybe you've most recently just joined a company new. Kind of tips or takeaways when you're a recent grad just joining a new company?
Yeah, I suppose it was quite different for me when I joined, because obviously it's all online, and it just makes everything a lot harder. You know, if you're in an office, you're going to meet people face to face, and it's a lot more of a seamless operation than it is, you know, putting time in people's diaries to go for a cup of coffee for people that you don't know. But I think to have your voice heard. So if you're in meetings with other teams, you know, ask questions. You have the graduate card. So you're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to be curious. You're encouraged to do so. So instead of sitting in the shadows and keeping quiet, you know, make sure that your voice is being heard, and people are being like, oh, that's the new graduate, or that's the new person to the company. I think that's a great way to get your, you know, to get your presence across, especially when it's virtual or when it's online. Yeah, that would probably be the main one. It was probably one I struggled with to begin with, and it was one that my manager encouraged me to get better at. And obviously, you can feel like your questions are mundane and they're not important, but whatever your input is, it is important, and it will benefit you in the long run for when you're developing relationships and, you know, building out that networking piece.
Thanks very much, Cliodhna. And I think Johnny, Gillian, myself, who've probably been working in industry a lot longer than yourself, will feel for all of those graduates that entered the market during the pandemic. That must have been very, very difficult to try and perform to your best without that kind of, I suppose, as you say, the water cooler just bumping into people, or just crossing over to a desk or an office. You had to schedule a casual chat if you wanted one. So I know companies worked very hard to counterbalance that from onboarding their graduates. So it was really, really interesting just to hear from somebody who's been there and entered the market during the pandemic. Johnny, Gillian, anything to add, or any tips for joining a new company and making that first impression?
Like I joined Veritas as well when obviously it's happening, and you would say if you had experience with it, you know, from being in the corporate world a while, that, you know, that should have been a little bit easier. It wasn't. It's completely uncharted. You know, you're doing as best you can. We even had someone remotely join from the US and you know, she's certainly, you know, not a graduate, but at that same time she's still having those same complex, you know, challenges, and you know, trying to get in, to try and reach out, setting up a bit of time. But also I completely agree with Cliodhna, it is about just saying things. I still do it. I know that leadership call I have later on today, you know, completely imposter syndrome, and to say that you shouldn't be in the necessary, you know, group that's there. But it is a case of saying, you know, being the person at that table, either be a virtual table, but it is to, you know, to have a say to it. And it was one of my managers who always said that as well, was, you know, we all remember the person who did ask rather than the person who didn't. And you will feel uncomfortable first, but you will also, it's better to have that than the regret of not saying anything afterwards. That's something that I've had as well. And so as much as you can, you know, say those things that kind of push yourself and challenge yourself a little bit more, it will pay off in the long run. It's uncomfortable, but it will pay off. Yeah.
And it sounds like volunteer, just visibility seems to be key when you're new in a company, particularly during the pandemic. And Johnny, any thoughts to add for a new hire?
Yeah, reputation is so important, because when you're the new person, the only thing people will know about you is your name, and the second thing people will know about you is the standard of your work. So you'll be very quickly judged, okay, that person is good or that person is not good. So taking ownership, as Gillian said, is super important, but you have to have very high standards when you're trying to create a good impression of yourself. So anything that you deliver, own it and make sure it's of a very, very high standard, because that 100 days is really good. Your reputation will spread and you don't get a second chance. If you come in tardy and you know, do poor job, that's going to stick with you. You kind of have to nail it from the start.
Excellent. And then just coming finally, I just want to talk about the market itself. Are you seeing any trends that maybe students of marketing should be aware of? Johnny, maybe I'll just ask you to come back and maybe start on that. Just any trends or upcoming areas that are dominant now or making a presence in marketing right now?
I'll say for digital, because my background is digital, so I couldn't answer any other stuff, but like from when I started to now, it's changed so much. It's genuinely like, there's Pinterest wasn't around a few years ago. There's so many new companies coming out, but within those companies as well, there's been changes around regulation, and kind of there's a focus now, particularly because the media have turned a spotlight towards it, of privacy, of you know, data tracking and using you know, identifiable data on persons without them knowing. So there's massive kind of push towards privacy. A lot of companies have started up around privacy, and there's lots of kind of, even within Google, I've seen a lot more positions and teams created specifically around this area, where it wasn't even an issue before. It wasn't something that was ever called out. And we've seen this a couple of times, like brand safety became an issue a couple of years ago. GDPR came in. Now you've got cookieless world coming, where cookies are going to be deprecated in 2023. These are all causing us to change the way our products work and operate. It means that new narratives are needed. New legal teams have to come in to ensure that we're doing things in a correct and legal manner. Otherwise, we will definitely get sued, because people love suing us. And yeah, it's an ever-changing one. I think if within digital, there's such a focus at the moment around privacy, and it's not going to go away, that you're going to see a lot more opportunities in the privacy side of things. But yeah, that's just very specific to digital.
Perfect. Thanks, Johnny. Gillian or Cliodhna, and anything else you've seen developing?
I look at obviously campaigns from what we are, but I think you know, we obviously looking at full funnel and the customer journey. Look, I did my master thesis in it, and it's still one of those you're like, does it, you know, does something else come up? But it's still the ever present, you know, euphoric moment that people want to get to, you know, that holistic blended journey between online and offline. It's still something that a lot of companies grapple with, and how we make that smoother. And you'll see things like, you know, customer success teams and customer, you know, engagement representatives. Like, there's so many things that are now focused on the customer, and we're trying to make that blended journey. So that's certainly we're looking at more long form content as well, instead of kind of, you know, what we've seen, you know, TikTok have taken kind of bite size. They're now kind of looking at that lot more, you know, longer form. So all of that and storytelling, personalization is, you know, that's another one that obviously companies are trying to get with, you know, and the more companies who do that better tend to do a lot better. You know, it could be cross advertising or, you know, even, you know, conversational e-commerce. You know, that's where you're talking to, I think Gymshark do it really good. It's where you're talking online. If you have a problem, all of a sudden, you know, someone's responding. That quick turnaround, like everything is just moving at a million miles a minute. And that's where I've certainly seen either our company or competitors or ones in that space within the industry. That's certainly where people want to get to. And, you know, certainly we're not there yet. But yeah, that's where I can still see where the movement is happening. And
there seems to be a balance there between the creativity of a marketing graduate with the business acumen, you know, the data, the financial. Is one more important than other, or have I just set a cat among the pigeons there in relation to marketing? Creativity versus financial. I mean,
I find it's a strange one, because I think I went in, or how I weighed up going into marketing versus accounting and economics was around the creativity aspect, but because I thought, you know, not necessarily numbers, but yet the two of them go so tandem. That's why sales and marketing are so intrinsically linked. You know, we're constantly being told, you know, great to have the brand experience and customer journey, yet what's the ROI? And, you know, as a marketing, don't, I suppose, think that that's obviously not completely, like, we're constantly looking at data, has to influence what we're doing in our full cycle. You know, we'll go out with a campaign, but yet what's the data from it? That's bring back the learning. So both of them are quite in tandem, and if one does take precedence, it nearly always reverts back to, oh, but the other. So it's kind of like a seesaw in terms of where it has to get, but one doesn't go with the other, you know, kind of without the
perfect.
other.
Thanks, Gillian. Cliodhna, just finally on, I suppose, from a domestic point of view, I'm sure in the retail side, the pandemic has really influenced the customer trends. Are you seeing anything maybe from the frank and honest journey post, well, I don't know, can we say post-pandemic, but, you know, wherever we are in it?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, I mean, even in terms of online shopping, that's huge, and that's gotten a big highlight in Musgrave in general, and there's been teams built out of that since the pandemic, and that's a brand new product that's huge to the business now, and that's only in the course of 2 years, just facilitating the needs of customers who didn't want to go into the store. Specifically for Frank and Honest, we've launched a digital loyalty app. Again, in tandem with the pandemic, people didn't want to be handing over cards and swapping of hands and germs, and even from a sustainability side of things, I think sustainability is up and coming, and it's a hot topic, and it's going to continue to be a hot topic. So Musgrave they're looking at ways they can be more sustainable, and that in turn is really affecting business decisions, business plans. So I think there's a lot of external things that will affect a company internally, and you have to just be able to, you know, accept the fact that change does occur and how you're going to overcome that. So there are a few of the examples, but there's loads. Like, but since I started, there, the two main ones, it would have been the pandemic and how we overcame that, and sustainability, which is ongoing.
That term that's overused, the new normal that we're all trying to get used to. Thanks very much to Cliodhna, Gillian, and Johnny. We leave, I suppose, our core webinar discussion there for now. If you can hang on for just a couple of minutes, we'll just take any questions into the chat box. We'll keep it very, very short, but if anybody has a particular question, we'll be happy to answer those now. So again, just while we're waiting for those to come in, there's been fantastic points raised today. On behalf of the UL Career Service and the University of Limerick, just to thank Gillian Maxwell from Veritas, Johnny Queally from Google, and Cliodhna Barrett from the Musgrave Group. Thanks very, very much. You probably didn't expect to be back in college at any stage, but as I said from the start, you know, you can go, but you can never leave. So thanks very much. And I know a lot of the students will be watching this at different times today, tomorrow. So they'll get huge value out of it. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we leave it there for this lunchtime, and wish everyone well in their studies. There's just one question there, sorry, from Sophie for you, Gillian, before we go. What company did you say Gillian worked for? Okay, that's Veritas Software, Gillian?
Yes,
Yeah.
software.
Technologies.
Yes, yeah, technologies. There is a religious book company. It's not that one. I will say
Okay.
it is not that one. It's a technology.